Awesome. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We got a couple participants in here and our lovely panelists. So I'll start off with introductions. So I'll introduce myself. I will be your host today. My name is Sarah Ali, and I'm a fourth year computer science student at Carleton University. And apart from coding and trying to get on with school during a pandemic, I spend my time during with our communities in tech. So I'm the president of the Carleton Computer Science Society, and Saurabh reached out to me from the Google Developer Student Club to help host this event for the Google Developer Student Club. So that's pretty fun. I'm really excited to be here and get to know all of you. And diversity is something that I spend a lot of time trying to learn about and to try and champion when I am at workplaces and in my community itself. So I'd love to learn from all of you who have gone really far in your careers and what you've learned and things that you can help us all out with. So yeah, without further ado, we can get started with our panelists. So Marlo, how about you go first? I'm going to go in horizontal order.
Sure. Yeah, no problem. Hi, everyone. I'm Marlo. My pronouns are he, him. I'm based in Vancouver, Canada, and I'm one of the development managers for the Shop Pay Installments team. So we handle Shopify's kind of native buy now, pay later solution inside of Shop Pay, which is Shopify's kind of persistent wallet solution. And yeah, I've worked at Shopify for about 8 months now. And as a development manager supporting a team of about 15 developers, I mean, diversity is hugely important for me. So I truly believe it's the best way that you get the best work done. So yeah, really happy to be here.
Awesome. Lovely to meet you, Marlo. Thank you. And I actually forgot to mention my own pronouns. It's she, her. Thank you for remembering that. Awesome. So Zuri, do you want to go next and introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hello, I'm Zurich Godfrey. My pronouns are he, him, and I am from Hampton, Virginia. Just moved to San Francisco, which is my virtual background. And so working in San Francisco, actually, but living in Oakland, California. I work at Google as an associate product marketing manager, where on the Google Ads product area, I help execute naming across the portfolio. And yeah, oh wow, Norfolk, Virginia. I actually went to high school in Norfolk, Virginia. Oh, I did not know that. We have to definitely connect, Francine. And yeah, that's me. Happy to be here. Looking forward to answering all of the questions. And yeah, thank you for having me.
Awesome. Lovely to see you, Zuri. Think I was at a former event where you were presenting too. So it's really nice to see you again. Awesome. And Shafina, did you want to go next?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, everyone. So my name is Shafina. I'm based out of Toronto, Canada. I am a University of Waterloo alumni, but I did not graduate from the computer science program, but I still happen to land a career in technology. So really excited to be here just to really give you my perspectives on, being a female in technology. Especially when I started out my career in the oil and gas industry, which was, even more of a shock to a lot of people, not just to myself, to everyone else that I was working with. But most recently, I am now a consultant with BDO Canada. So I work with organizations to roll out Microsoft tools and technology to really make them more productive and efficient. So looking forward to this.
Awesome. Thank you for the introduction. It's so nice to meet you. And last but not least, we have Frances. Do you want to
hi, everyone.
Yeah, hi.
Hi, I'm Frances. I'm currently a senior software engineer, a former nonprofit ED, and a loving corgi mom to my 2 corgi dogs, Luna and Sueño. Currently, I work at Byteboard, where we're trying to build a technical interview that assesses for ability, not access and privilege. I previously worked at Slack for about 4 years, specializing on the customer acquisition team in UI development and lead generation. And outside of work, I volunteer for Tequeria, which is a nonprofit that serves the largest community of Latinx professionals in tech. So really excited to be here.
That's awesome, Frances. That's so cool. We're so excited to get your insight on these things. Awesome. So we'll start off with our questions. And I think first we have Marlo. So a question for you. So why is having diversity in tech important to you?
Oh, great question. So really, for me personally, diversity in tech kind of is like having appropriate representation, right? So, individuals can kind of see folks that look like themselves and have kind of shared experiences and cultures with individuals, say, in leadership, where they want to go in their career, as well as just kind of being able to work with them kind of on the day-to-day, right? So I think as well, it's like, it's kind of interesting, like it's kind of overall win-win for diversity, because companies end up having better outcomes, just objectively, right? Like, I think it's often kind of talked about and raised. I think there was like, it was a few years ago, but a Harvard Business Review article, and Harvard Business Review, I think, puts out a lot of content on diversity. But teams, you know, who are more diverse are just smarter, they introspect ideas better, and they really come to higher quality outcomes. And so, I mean, as a dev manager myself, that's really kind of great from a selfish point of view, because like I get to see really great outcomes from my teams. And yeah, it's personally really important to me. So I try to you know, lead by example and try to kind of challenge my own biases and lean into really making sure that diversity is like a solid vector for how I build my team. Yeah.
That's amazing, Marlo. And I honestly really appreciate that you mentioned the win-win, because not a lot of people are aware unless they're actually educated on this. But there's research on the fact that diversity leads to, you know, better workplaces, better products, better businesses. And it's something that's not looked over. People like, you know, I know like, especially my generation and students who are just getting into the workplace, they don't see it that it can actually benefit the bottom line when we're going right into the basics of business. So I learned that in business school when I was there for a couple of years. So I'm really glad you brought that up, because it's not just the it's not just social benefits, it really does impact the work that you create and the environment that people are working in. So thank you for bringing that up. I like your perspective. Thank you. Anyone else want to add anything to that? Why diversity in tech might be important to them? Okay, cool. We can go on to the next questions then. And then we have yes, so I wanted to ask Zuri, so in your experience, where have you found the biggest gap in tech where there's not as much diversity as you wanted to see?
Yeah, I would say specifically, and this is an observation that I've seen, and it's definitely on the developer side. And at Google specifically, and I'm sure this holds true at majority of the larger tech companies, they're making strides in having more diversity of representation within marketing, within sales, within HR especially. But on the developer side and the super technical software engineering side, it lacks, there's a huge gap. So hoping that clubs like yourself and other organizations can help improve that. But that's definitely where I see the biggest gap.
You definitely, I concur with that. Absolutely. I think there's research on it that it starts from the bottom level, like from high schools. Even minorities, especially gender minorities and other racial minorities, are gatekept from tech, even though the other STEM degrees and STEM professions are getting a bit better. You know, you've seen a lot more women in science, a lot more women in some types of engineering and health science and things like that. But with tech, there's still a lot of work to be done. So yes, what you're saying, I think the research and the statistics really back up what you've seen. So yeah, definitely. And I wanted to ask Shafina, so do you have any perspective on that as well, where there's a gap in diversity in tech?
Yeah, so apart from, the physical aspects of diversity, I think there's still a lot of improvement that's required from leaders in the industry to understand that, there's also a diversity in the way people think. And, the maturity in your critical ability to think, your cognitive flexibility, there's so much diversity in the way that people can think. And it's really beneficial to organizations to want to invest in individuals who have that diversity in thought, because now we're in a time where there's so many solutions out there in the market. And a lot of organizations need people who can work with organizations to make these solutions benefit their bottom line at the end of the day. And so you need people who can go into organizations and who can think creatively to say, these are your business challenges. This is the technology and tool that you're using. How can we work them together to really improve your bottom line and make you more money at the end of the day? And so there really needs to be a diversity in thought and critical thinking out there that, a lot of leaders just haven't really caught on to yet, I see.
Definitely, definitely. I like that you brought up, like the non-visible factors of diversity because I find that in my experience, disability can come into that as well because there are invisible disabilities. There's chronic illnesses and mental health illnesses, all these things that can actually they do present as diversity and ability and being able to, like your employees are diverse in ability and thinking and thought and beliefs and just customers represent that as well. So I think if we go at it at an angle that's like business focused, I can't see any loss in actually developing these kinds of initiatives and these things. And which leads me to my next question, Shafina. I wanted to ask you, is there anything that your organization is working on that you find has been helpful in tackling the lack of diversity in tech?
Yeah, the first step that, I think a lot of organizations, not just BDO, have done is, to really stand up these committees internally, to start to educate employees in terms of what diversity means, what it means to be inclusive, really starting from foundational knowledge development within the organization. So people have that awareness. A lot of individuals don't realize that there is a need for more inclusion. So, BDO is really doing a lot of work internally and as well as externally. So hosting external webinars to educate the wider community and, educate employees within. They're also providing individuals with the opportunity to stand up and offer their thought leadership and own a pillar of diversity. So, allow them to develop what they think this means within the organization and how they can start to actually educate others around them. And then from a technology perspective, BDO's also got an innovation factory. And this innovation factory is currently brainstorming a whole variety of ways to include diversity in our technology projects. So as an example, how are we actually working with organizations to roll out technology for accessibility needs, as an example. So we've got a lot of really cool little pockets of projects that are going on, and it's just really great to see that they've accepted that this is something that we need to do. So it's been really great to see.
That's so exciting. Thank you for mentioning those initiatives. I think that's really exciting, especially for prospective newer employees coming in, because I find that there's been a generational shift where students my age, people my age coming into the industry, we care about these social issues. We care that we're represented, and it's not as something that we can look over anymore. So I think as soon as organizations recognize that and they really invest in these kinds of initiatives, they recognize employees doing this kind of work. I think it really benefits not only their customer base but also the kind of talent that they're attracting. So
Yeah,
thanks for mentioning that. Yeah, that's awesome. Oh, and Francis, I had a question for you. So it kind of follows a bit on what Shafina already said. But what resources are available to you maybe at your workplace when you join the workforce as an underrepresented person in tech?
Yeah, I think there's often sort of a preconceived notion that being underrepresented in tech and not really seeing a lot of people who are similar background as you is sort of a hindrance. But I would challenge folks to kind of think of it as a strength and finding community in that strength and that identity and being proud of it and embracing it. I think that a lot of jobs are found through referrals, and statistically that has been found to be the case, like networking. And if you join communities that cater to that, you're going to have a leg up in the job search process. But another thing that is also available when you do join the workforce is something called an ERG, or an employee resource group. Almost every major tech company has this kind of model, and including smaller companies. And this is really something you want to take advantage of as an underrepresented person, because they usually have a pretty big budget. And it is up to you to sort of take advantage of that, in my opinion. I will say though, and this is something that I've kind of learned, I would caution folks to kind of, this is something I've grappled with as well, just being careful how much time you dedicate to diversity and inclusion that takes away from your day-to-day responsibilities. Because honestly, I would love to see more underrepresented people at the very top of the ladder, at the highest levels of leadership, but we're not going to get there if we're constantly being taken away to talk about diversity. And usually what I see at tech conferences is it's pretty homogenous, the speakers, until you get to the diversity in tech panel. And that's the only time you see people of color. So I would just challenge you to just sort of be careful about that. It's something that I think when I was earlier in my career, I spent so much time and energy wanting to advocate for people who look like me. But at the same time, you have to recognize that people who are not underrepresented don't have to deal with this extra sort of burden or feeling of obligation to kind of give back to their community. And what would serve us better is like having people who can lead by example and then pull people up as well. So I would love to kind of see more of that in this space as well. But obviously, like, I'm here for a reason. I'm taking time out of my Saturday because I really care about this stuff. But it is something that I have talked with many college students about. Like recently, I talked with a Black woman who is at Google. She just started as a software engineer there, and they're already asking her to talk at diversity panels. And so for me, I kind of grapple with that, and I'm like, can we maybe like focus on your software engineering career? And if they're not like paying you or compensating you in like any way, especially if it doesn't impact your promotion, like your ability to get promoted, like just rethink that, because I would rather see you get to engineering manager and then be like this amazing inspiration to Black women everywhere, instead of like being pigeonholed into just being like that woman of color who's an engineer. And that's something that, I recognize in myself as well.
Yeah, and just
Wow.
to add to that, that is definitely something that I align and agree with and needed to hear myself as well. It's sort of tokenism, So just being cognizant of that. But yeah, great words.
That was amazing, Francis. I think you really hit the nail on the head, because this is something I being someone who's a vocal person in my program, and seeking out these leadership opportunities, and really being involved in championing like younger students coming in and increasing representation of women in tech, even in my own community. I think it does become kind of like a labor. It does become it is a form of emotional labor where you're represented and you're like shown around as a trophy. Like we hired a brown person, we hired a Muslim woman. Back when I used to wear hijab, I was the token Muslim person, going everywhere. Like, we care about people, and in some cases you are making a difference, right? Like when you're here, Francis, people are being inspired by you, but it's how much effort are you really giving in, and how much is it paying back to you? Like, is this something that's going to come up in your performance review? Are you going to be thought about this? Like, is it the same as someone giving a project or presentation on their work? Is it valued the same? So I think what you really brought up is an amazing thought process, because I think a lot of people need to think about how much work they're doing for free when it comes to championing the social causes they care about, and how much they're actually appreciated for it, really. So thank you. It really gave me a lot to think about. I think a lot of the panelists are thinking about that too. Does anyone else want to respond to Francis? Maybe talk a little bit about this more, because I think we opened a really good discussion here.
Yeah, I'd say like kind of a key issue there is, right, getting that recognition, right, for doing that kind of work. And we see a similar interesting area with what is classically called like glue work, right? Like the work about the work, getting alignment, getting people together, taking notes on meetings, making sure that like, people have everything they need to unblock themselves, and how classically that work is not given the recognition as like pure technical contributions, especially in the engineering space, right? So advocating for that and kind of challenging your leaders to recognize that work as the importance that it is really kind of, you can do it really at any level, but I think like for folks like myself who are given a little bit more visibility and, kind of handed a team to lead, for me, then it becomes part of my responsibility set that like I must recognize that in my reports and in my team. And I also, just try to point it out to my leaders as well, that like we need that kind of stuff really called out inside of like competency matrices, job ladders, whatever your artifact is. Yeah.
Sorry, Sarah, before you continue on, I'll just, echo what Francis says. When you start with an organization, understand what your skill set really is that you're bringing to the table. Participate in these diversity and inclusion opportunities, because we are at a pivotal point in life where, we're in this transition where we're trying to educate and bring awareness to organizations and individuals. But don't forget about your skills and why you were actually hired. And, why you want to advance your career and in which area, and stay focused on that for sure. Don't get sidetracked because this is an opportunity that the organization is offering you. Stay focused on your career path for sure.
I love that. I love that we could talk about this and that a lot of you have the same experiences and ideas on this, because I think it's something that's a little bit difficult to talk about with people who are really, really looking forward to championing diversity, to talk about, what's in it for me, really. Like, I'm going to be dead honest. What is it in it for me? Apart from, empowering minorities and helping people, the next generation of tech people coming in. But you do have to focus on your own career. You have to forge your own path, because that's another way to lead by example, like Francis just mentioned. That's another way to champion diversity and champion inclusion, by showing that you got there. So I think that's a really good way to mention that there's different ways to do this. There's ways that can that quite often make a bigger impact in some cases when you're actually giving a presentation on your work, on your product, on your features. That's another way to show that that we can do it. So I really like that we talked about that. I'm really happy about that. And Francis, I did have another question for you. So the question is about mentorship. So have you found that maybe there's been a mentor in your life that's made an impact on you so far, and how it went?
Yeah, I think like in most spaces I was in growing up, when I was starting to learn computer science in undergrad, grad school, I was usually the only Latina engineer in my space, in any spaces that I went to, whether it was the classroom or in the workspace. It wasn't until I joined Slack that for the first time in my career, I had a Black woman as a manager. And that for me sort of gave me validation that I could one day get to her level. And I felt like for the first time I was able to relate to a lot of what we shared in our one-on-ones, like between direct report and manager. And to this day, she still serves as like inspiration. She's on a lot of like those lists, women to watch in tech or what have you. And she's just kind of a badass. And so to like be exposed to someone like that so early on in my career was really a blessing. And I really appreciate her for just breaking those barriers. It is not easy. And she has told me many a horror story of just like what she's had to deal with as a Black woman who's taking up space and is criticized for doing things that if she were a man, she like no one would blink an eye, right? So there's just that double standard. Yeah, I'll share her name. Her name is Arquay Harris. She's currently a VP of engineering at Webflow. And just like overall a really amazing person. So definitely like recommend you follow her if you're looking for inspirational figures in tech. But I think just having that experience early on can be really game changing for someone like myself and any others. Like if you get that opportunity, definitely like try to just learn as much as you can from the other person, because they've been in your shoes before and they just have like that context.
I love that, Francis. I thank you so much for linking her LinkedIn as well. That's so helpful. Thank you, especially for viewers watching as well. And I like that you mentioned that, having a manager who related to you in a lot of aspects really strengthened the bond and mentorship that you received from her, because I find that that's been lacking in my experience. I don't think I've ever had a female boss who wasn't Caucasian, anyone who looked like me, who could relate to my experiences being a minority in tech. So that definitely changes everything. You feel connected, you feel open. And I'm so happy that was a positive experience for you and that you continued to develop that relationship. That's a real success story, in my opinion, that you're able to really connect with her for so long. So
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Actually, yeah, if I can point something else out too, just statistically, right? Like if we look at the industry and who historically has been in leadership positions, it is usually like it's pretty homogenous, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is because people want to mentor people who look like them, where they can see themselves in the person that they're mentoring, right? And we're just not really there. So there's just kind of like a less likelihood that we're going to be mentored because they just don't see themselves in us, And so if we're trying to uplift, we have to be able to kind of pay it forward once we do get to that level, and find those opportunities to mentor folks who, were like us when they first started out. So,
I love that. I like the chain. That's honestly a huge factor of mentorship. I found that as I got older, into upper years of computer science, I was finding more value from mentoring instead of receiving mentorship from older students because I'm already done, nearly done. So I think it's a really good habit to pay back what you've received, and continue it forward because that's how we grow as an industry. That's how we develop better practices at work and in the products that we create. So thank you for mentioning that as well. Awesome. And I think, Zuri, I wanted to ask you about a mentor that you maybe have had in the past who's been helpful for you in your journey.
Yep. So I try to take a holistic approach in many ways. And one of those ways is mentorship. So personally and professionally, a mentor of mine that is tied directly to my want to be an entrepreneur and am an entrepreneur, but long term would want to follow in this person's footsteps. His name is Malcolm Johnson. I'll send his LinkedIn as well. And one thing that I stress about mentorship and even generally when reaching out to others, I would recommend that you prioritize people that you can really connect to on a personal level, that you have common and mutual interest in. And for context, Malcolm played college football, which I did as well. Malcolm went to the NFL. I didn't go to the NFL, I chose the tech route, and also worked in corporate as an executive director for JP Morgan and Chase in LA, a market in which I was definitely interested in, have lived in. And moreover, and more importantly, he was able to build his business while working at JP Morgan, at least the foundation behind the scene, and then retire as an executive director at one of the top banks in the world, and now be full-time and as an entrepreneur, build a team and scale. So he is definitely someone that was very inspirational for me, still is to this day, and is still a mentor of mine to this day, and just invites me over for dinner. We really have a genuine relationship. It's not even really a mentorship, I would say. It's more of a transformational relationship versus a transactional mentorship. So I'm really thankful for him. And then professionally, and when I say professionally, more so corporate wise, my mentor is Jordan Fowler, who works at Google and I'm an associate product marketing manager. She's a product marketing manager. So she's been through the program that I am now, the 2 rotations that I have to do. She's been through them, have been successfully promoted. And also, which is very, very important, is that she actually has worked side by side with our chief marketing officer and Lorraine at Google. So knowing that Jordan, as my mentor, has connections and understands Google's marketing priorities is important for me. And she's a Black woman, so we can relate from both being Black, and she's also into all things tech and entrepreneurship, so we relate to that as well. And so that's definitely the professional corporate mentor that I have and lean on to this day. So I highly encourage everyone to seek out mentors, and those mentors can hopefully and potentially become sponsors for you. But that's also another conversation in itself, because there is a difference between mentorship, sponsorship, and even coaching. So hopefully that was helpful.
That's amazing. I honestly love to hear these stories of people who are so successful, who really made it, actually lend out a hand to lift others up, and it's awesome because I imagine that, it's kind of hard to get to where you are alone. There's always been a chain of people helping each other out and giving each other chances. And I like to see that continue. So thank you, Zuri. That's really exciting. And Malcolm Johnson sounds like a legend, I have to say. Like that's a well-lived life. That's awesome. It's really cool. So thank you for all these links and all these people, and thank you for the resource as well, Francis, about the lack of people of color being mentored by their white superiors, because we don't look like them. There needs to be a basis of a connection and like feeling related to each other to have that kind of experience going forward. But that's so cool. That's awesome. And I want to continue with the rest of our questions. So Francis, back to you. So how do you find that the intersection of identities impacts your experience in tech? and it's something that I'm personally invested in as someone who's disabled and who's also, you know, brown. So like, how do these kind of experiences affect how people work in tech?
Yeah. So I have a friend that I found through LinkedIn. He's disabled, paraplegic, uses a wheelchair to get around. And he's Latino. And when I first met him, I couldn't really obviously relate to like him being disabled because I don't have a disability and I'm very privileged in that aspect. But I could relate to kind of his identity, obviously, as a Latino man. And that's just kind of at the crux of what intersectionality is, right? That we all have different identities that we connect with. Some may be stronger than others. So personally, like in my career, I have found that I have been able to connect more with my Latinx identity than my identity as a woman. And this kind of comes because usually when we're talking about diversity in tech, what I've seen a lot of in this space in my career is that it usually relates to kind of like specifically gender identity and not so much racial identity, which is very different. And so being at that intersection, being a woman of color, we're identified both as like being a woman who, yes, is underrepresented, but also a Latina who is even more underrepresented. That, you know, it's essentially like there's a lot of code switching depending on like what the spaces you're in. So I would say like, for me, what I try to do is respect like all the different intersectional identities people have when I interact with them and recognize where my blind spots are. Because I think we all have unconscious biases, whether we recognize them or not. We don't know everything about everybody's identities. At work, my coworker is a trans woman. I don't know a lot of trans people, and it's something I'm really like grateful now that I have the opportunities to get to learn more about. Right. So even though I'm technically like a double minority, like I still have so many blind spots. And I think that's what's beautiful about intersectional identity is that we get to bring like all these different strengths and unify them into one thing. And kind of like get the best of both worlds actually, or whatever we bring to the table. Like for me, I get to, you know, get the benefits of being like in all these women organizations that provide so many things to me and resources and networking. And also like the Latinx identity too, I get that benefit as well. So again, when I was starting out in my career, I kind of hid away from my identity. I tried not to focus on it because I saw it as a hindrance because I didn't see myself in this space very often. But if you look at it as a strength and see it as a way for you to kind of get as much advantage from it and grow from it, inevitably it will come up as you level up more in your career too. You know, people are going to wonder like, how did they become successful, like despite everything, right? So yeah, that's my 2 cents on that.
That's awesome. Thank you. And thank you for mentioning blind spots. I think it's someone who is even within minorities, we have blind spots when it comes to each other. We're all different. You know, you don't know what anyone's dealing with and the privileges and the oppressions they may be facing and discrimination and things like that. So I think it's really important to recognize that we need to treat people with empathy and give them the benefit of the doubt when, you know, when they're hurt by something, and to try and come at it with a level of respect and try and an attempt to understand. So I like that you brought that up, Francis, because I don't think it's black and white like that. I don't think it's clear cut who's benefiting and who isn't, and who's doing better and who isn't, as much as we like to think it is. So I think that's a really good discussion to have, even among people in your workplace and people in your communities, to see how better we can support everybody, really. So I like that. Thank you. And let's see what else we got here. Yeah. Oh, in Francis, you again. Yeah. So what is something that about your experience that you find is often misunderstood by your colleagues?
Actually, I would love to kind of point that back to the rest of the panelists and hear
Oh,
what they
sure.
have to say about
Yeah,
that one.
if you all are comfortable answering this, or yeah.
Yeah, I would say for me, and I think hopefully I can be very relatable to those on the call. And I say that because I graduated this past May, so May 2021. So I'm super young. And if you take a look at my LinkedIn profile, my resume, etc., I've been able to have a lot of corporate experiences, internships, externships, and now full-time at Google. But what they don't, or what may be misunderstood, is really where I started. And where I started was with rejection, with failure, but also with smaller companies and smaller experiences that one led to the other. So I think that's definitely misunderstood about my experience as a whole, is that I didn't start by interning at PwC or start by interning at Google and working with other companies as well, but really started small. And after rejection, failure, and then perseverance, I was able to catch fire, build my resume, build my brand, and land different opportunities. So I said that to say, to hopefully inspire and motivate those who are maybe facing rejection, maybe failing in some ways. Let that be fuel to your fire and keep going.
Thank you. That's amazing. I think there's quite a few phrases and about that kind of experience. It's like they only see where you are. They don't see how you got there. They don't see the years you put in, the rejections, the struggle, the grind, honestly. So I like that you brought that up, because find that LinkedIn has become this kind of form of like Instagram, where you're showing only your successes and your celebrations. People aren't seeing how much you struggled, how you basically had to, how many people you had to lean on, how much help you had to get where you are. So I think that's a really good example, and something we have to be mindful of, because I find that LinkedIn can sometimes be, same way some other social medias can affect you and make you feel like you're less than or you're not doing well enough. LinkedIn has become that kind of environment as well. So thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah, and I just wanted to even
Francis just mentioned that LinkedIn doesn't have a section to add professional failures.
Hey, you should raise that to the product team at LinkedIn. But
yes, please continue, Zuri. Sorry.
no, I just wanted to even highlight a personal story, hopefully pretty brief, is regarding that. My sophomore year, I had interned with PwC, received a return offer. Long story made short, I wanted to get a different experience at a different company. And so I let that return offer expire. And there's more detail into that, but that's not the important part of what I'm saying. But I literally interviewed with Amazon, Facebook, AT Kearney, and a plethora of companies, and all failed. Did not get any of those offers. And Google was the one, my dream company. And that was actually my second to last internship interview that I had for that summer. And I thankfully was able to get it. The moral and the point in that story is, one, be persistent, don't give up. But two, also very, very much prepare for what you want your dream to be. I actually didn't spend much time prepping for those companies that I didn't get the offer from, but I did spend intensely and extensively time preparing for my dream company, which was Google. So hopefully that resonated and made sense.
I love that. I love to see that it paid off. That's so inspiring. I think for a lot of us students here, it's hiring season right now. So it's really good to hear that, Zuri. Thank you. Anybody else want to mention about, before we go back to Francis and ask her about it, anyone else want to mention about something that they feel that they're misunderstood, that's something that they find that their colleagues misunderstand about them?
I wouldn't say it's necessarily a misunderstanding, but it's kind of back to the whole, the Venn diagram of all of our collective experiences and identities, right? Like, I'm sure if you look at my name, Marlo Payne, you are probably not going to expect like what you see here, right? So, and that's because, I was a product of transnational adoption, born in Korea, adopted by first generation immigrants to Canada. My mother German and my father English, and grew up in kind of, a small kind of rural town. And so it's very different, right? Like, as you can imagine. So it's just kind of like, the sharing of all of those experiences really, you can't like forcefully do it, right? Like it comes up organically as you get to know each other. So that's kind of the interesting thing with, especially when you are forming those relationships with your colleagues, right? Like being kind of open and honest and transparent as much as possible about what your summation is just really important, I think, to be able to offer as many kind of opportunities for that interpersonal connection.
I thank you for sharing your experience, Marlo. That was really insightful because I find that you've really touched upon a good point where we can tokenize people that we care about. We can tokenize people we're around. And if we see them as these boxes and categories and labels. So of course I find value in being seen as a Pakistani woman and as a disabled person or as a queer person and all these things. But that we're more than the sum of our parts, right? That's what it comes down to. So I think there has to be some respect and empathy involved in the way that we categorize people and we think about them because we're not objects that we can put into categories. Like human experience is so vast and so nuanced. So thank you for touching upon that, how your experience, might be not be what people expect to hear when you talk about yourself. So thank you. Yeah. And Shafina, did you have any comments on this?
I was going to make a comment, but I think, everything that the panelists have touched on is extremely relevant and valid. One thing about how LinkedIn doesn't actually have a section for professional failures, something that people don't know about me is that I've managed to do what I have in my career because as much as I have failed, I don't consider them as failures. And, they're just an experience for me to take to the next challenge, essentially. And, every challenge ends with an experience and takes me into the next challenge. And so, a lot of times people ask, how did you become recognized by Microsoft as a professional in your career? And it's not because I know everything about Microsoft, but it's because I'm able to share knowledge confidently. And when I, don't happen to know something, I'm able to share that with my network and ask them to teach me. And so, creating open dialogue on LinkedIn has really benefited me. And it may seem like I'm spinning things, which, yeah, you are spinning things at time, but it is really setting the stage in terms of people understanding more about you. Are you open to learning? Are you open to conversations? Are you open to dialogue? And I think that's a big value of LinkedIn is that people are sharing their professional knowledge as well and creating that community of professionalism. But everything else that everyone else touched on is quite valid and I would attest to as well. I just wanted to throw that in.
Thank you. I think that your growth mindset is really inspiring. But I personally found that this kind of comes with practice and age. When you're like a little kid, you're 18, 19, your first rejection feels like the end of the world. So I like that you've been able to grow this kind of thicker skin and this resilience and been able to, validate your own self-worth when you do maybe mess up or you make mistakes or something doesn't work out. And I think that gives us hope for all of us who are still growing in their journey. We're at the beginning, and to see that maybe one day I'll receive a rejection or I'll fail something or I won't get the promotion, and it won't hurt. It won't feel like I've messed up. It won't feel like I suck, at my job, So that's really inspiring, and it gives us something to look forward to. Thank you, Shafina. And yeah, Francis, to come back to you, did you want to answer this question as well, or we can move on to the next one?
No, yeah, I mean, echoing kind of what everyone else has said, I 100% agree. So huge +1. I really relate to sort of the failure part and also what Shafina mentioned about not necessarily being like the smartest person, but just like being able to fall down and kind of be able to pick yourself back up, like that grit, right? It's often coined as grit. That is like that persistence, that grit is what's going to get you farther than everybody else. So 100% agree. I would actually encourage people to like fail bigger. If you think about it, the most successful people have the most impressive failures as well. Being like rejected by Harvard versus being rejected by a state school, like that's like a kind of quintessential example, but like that kind of failure, right? It's actually a privilege to even be in that space where you can say, yeah, I was rejected by Harvard, like things like that, if that makes sense. So I would just encourage people to sort of look at failure as a way to grow, and the bigger the failure, the more you're learning from it. But also there is this double standard, and I want to put that out there, right? Especially in the tech industry, where often I do see a lot of leaders like publicly fail, and there's like that sort of quote of like being able to fail upwards. And so I think it's important to kind of note that as well. And so that and I think this is partially why I don't like to talk about my failure, and a lot of people I know don't openly talk about their failure, because they recognize that there is a double standard, and that if you're failing, it's almost like you're failing your entire like demographic or whatever, whoever you're representing. And everything has to always be like A-okay, publicly, even when things are actually not. because you have to be showing your best face at all times. So just kind of recognizing that burden and like recognizing that double standard when it comes to failure and publicly failing or privately failing, I think is important to mention as well. But 100% like failure is inevitable and you should just embrace it as it's going to keep happening and just like, yeah, learn to sort of celebrate it sometimes. Yeah.
I love that you mentioned that, Francis, because I think there's a lot of truth in being at that point. Like you have to get to a point where you can talk about it. Because as someone who's, starting in my career, if I start talking about all the mistakes I made, I can't do that on LinkedIn. I'm still looking for jobs. I'm still looking to start my journey. So I think there is some point where you get safe enough. You have a cushion, you have a trampoline, you have a soft landing where you can talk about all the ways that you messed up and it doesn't impact you. So I like that you brought that up, Francis, because I don't think everyone has that privilege to be authentic until they get to a safe for, like a stability spot. So thanks for mentioning that, because I don't think it's as clear cut as, being open about failure, but also just, not removing the stigma and this obsession with perfectionism that comes with this industry, because we're so methodological. Like we like to, get everything right. And just really removing that and like recognizing that people make mistakes, people change their minds, people learn through growth and these kinds of things. But there is a level where you have to feel like you're not harming yourself when you talk about it. So thank you. That's a really great point. So I think that's all from me. I think that's everything that I wanted to ask you all. So I'm going to open up the floor for the Q&A in the chat to see if anyone has any questions for you guys too. So yes, Q&A time. Yeah, let's go. So you guys can actually in the chat put in your questions in here, everybody, and you can ask the panelists directly, or we can put it for the whole board. So yep, awesome. I really honestly loved all your questions and everything that you guys answered, because I found it really helpful as someone who's still growing and learning, and to see that you've been able to take these experiences and turn it into a positive learning form for you. So that's really inspiring. Awesome. So yeah, so the first question that we have is what is your favorite part about working in tech? Does anyone want to answer this? Anyone have anything on the top of their heads? Nobody has a favorite part about working in tech? Oh, Shafina.
I mean, like, yeah, there's a lot, right? But I think, my answer is going to be very cliched, right? But it's basically the people. I mean, it comes from my job function as well as, but just my experiences. And so, I kind of chose this career path because I find that this is one of the greatest sources of my energy, even though I'm fairly introverted, funny enough. So I really enjoy working with smart individuals, and I enjoy working with a team where I feel like I'm out of my depth most of my time, right? I'm surrounded by people definitely more smarter than I am, but I can lean into the skill sets that I'm good with, and be able to kind of, bring individuals together into a team that can go off and have wider impact than those individuals could on their own.
I like that. I like that you mentioned that tech is a place where we really see a lot of growth happening and skill sharing. I personally enjoy that as well. I used to be a bit afraid coming into work and feeling like I didn't know anything, but seeing this environment where people are so open to sharing knowledge and passing forward, like really eliminating tech debt. That's what we call it, right? Where we try to really make sure that everyone's on the same page, and seeing that that's actually a principle of our industry and our work. It's been really reassuring. So I'm happy to see that that's really been helpful for you too, Marlo. Cool. Anybody else have any parts about working in tech that they want to talk about?
Yeah, I'll just, or go ahead, Zuri.
No, you got it.
Okay, I'll be quick. I really love being in technology because I get to solve people's problems. They come to us and they're like, hey, we don't know how to do this, or we're having a hard time using the system, or this is broken, or there's something like, the world is ending in their mind. And I get to come in and solve their problems. And at the end of the day, they just think, I'm amazing, when it's actually the technology. But, so I get this natural sense of accomplishment, and I feel great about myself because, I get to help people. And so if that sounds like something that you like to do, definitely reach out to me, because I can talk to you about how to get into consulting and, helping businesses solve problems with technology. It's so much fun. You get to do that every day.
That's amazing. And I think you really described consulting in a really amazing way. I've never heard of consulting described in that way. And it's such a really cool, like as if you're really helping the industry grow and things like that. So that's really awesome. I might actually take you up on that offer, Shafina, later on. Awesome. And Zuri, what would you like to say? Sorry.
Yeah, outside of people, which Marlo spoke to, my favorite part of tech is the flexibility, whether it is the flexibility in the attire, but more so for me, the flexibility in the time. And what I mean by that is I don't work 9 to 5. I essentially do everything that I need to do within that day. Sometimes that's starting later and ending later, or starting early and ending early. So flexibility is definitely the most important thing, and also the thing that I love most about tech.
Awesome. Francis, did you want to answer this question, or we can move on to the next one?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think it's just such a privilege, I think, to be in this industry when we compare it to other industries, just like the perks, the money, the benefits, the work from home, the lifestyle, just the visibility, the impact. There's just so many pros. I think one thing for me, as someone whose parents like immigrated here from Peru and like had the quintessential like child of immigrant story growing up, where it was like, you know, trying to chase the American dream, and like they were very hardworking and did everything they could to like uplift me to get to me to where I am. I love the perk of kind of getting intergenerational wealth. I joined Slack very early on, and obviously like have reaped the benefits from that as they got acquired and IPO'd and whatnot. And that's just something that can really lift so many people if they get in early enough, and especially if they're underrepresented. So I really appreciate how fast you can grow the intergenerational wealth that is possible of being like part of the tech industry. Yeah.
Amazing. I am so happy to hear you talk about that, because I think it is a huge draw for a lot of people in tech to becoming and entering this industry. And I think we deserve it. I think we deserve like all the education and the work that we put into, and the products that we create and the problems that we solve. I see it as a good thing. I see it as a positive that we're able to actually, reap these benefits because we put in the work. We're empowering these companies to build these tools, and it's awesome. So that's really cool. And the next question that I have is from Elias in the chat, and he asked, do you think it's possible to transition from different sectors in the tech industry? Do any of you have any experience between transitioning between different roles in tech and different skill sets, maybe something like that?
There's just, it's full of transitions, right?
Yes.
It really is. It's kind of actually back to kind of what Zuri mentioned about flexibility, right? Like I think tech also is one of those places where you can really define what you're good at and create a job around it, or find some high alignment there. The transitions inside of the tech industry are really varied as well, right? Because tech is a huge umbrella. It can be just like, kind of what Shafina touched on with consulting, and like what Shopify and myself is responsible for, which is like in-house product development kind of thing in a SaaS model. And like I've actually made that transition myself. Like when I first started my career, I was in consulting, and then transitioned to in-house product development. But then there's also like my own transition from an individual contributor to a leader of individual contributors. There is like the kind of really nitty gritty transitions of like, if you're familiar with like a .NET stack, and then like Shopify being a Ruby on Rails shop, we kind of, ask that most developers make a transition if they're not super familiar with Rails. And yeah, it's all over. I think as well, though, like coming back to diversity, like I love when I see individuals from just like very interesting new fields kind of come into tech too, right? Like fields like I am actually about to hire an intern for the summer who started as an accountant, and then, was not having a good alignment there, and then went back to boot camping and learning programming, and then seeking an internship for the summer. And so I'm really like excited to hire this person, because my team, Shop Pay Installments, is in kind of the world of like finances and money movement and stuff like that. So just like very cool overlap of those skills, right? And experiences.
That's awesome. I like that you talked about that, because I find that tech has been really encouraging of different experiences coming into tech. Similar to your intern, I actually have I was actually pursuing a double degree in business and computer science back in 2016 for 3 years. And then I focused just on computer science. But everything that I learned there has been so helpful for me, because my interest has always lied in fintech. So that's been so helpful, like the accounting, all these things. So I was working at an e-commerce company last summer and able to actually just write these equations or formulas by hand. And we have a machine learning model for that. So having that kind of knowledge and that background and the context really, really helps. And I've seen that in tech, this is seen as a plus, not as a negative, that you came from somewhere else. And I might not have as much, CS experience as other developers would, but my experience has still been so valuable within my teams and things like that. So I think that's one of my favorite things about tech, is that we really welcome other backgrounds coming in, other professional fields and things like that. So yeah, that's so cool. Anyone else have anything to say about transitioning maybe?
I'll just add to that. Once you're in an organization, you land your first tech role, the opportunities are endless, but you have to put it out there. No one's going to read your mind, and they're not going to know that you're looking to expand or learn a new skill set. So, make it known. Talk to people in the organization, network internally, talk about what they do, ask them what they're doing, get to know the different roles so you can start to formulate what you want your career path to be. So once you're in, the opportunities are endless.
Yeah, that's a really important point. Yeah. And that kind of is, it's resonant on some of the other things that we've talked about earlier. And I would summarize it as kind of like, you are responsible for being your strongest advocate, right? In your career, in your life, and everything, really. Because I mean, like, I see it through all of the people that I support and coach and stuff. I can't read their minds as best as I try, right? So it's like, if a developer wants to expand in the stack, or wants to specialize, or is thinking about management, or thinking about staying on the IC track and being like a staff developer and going across that dimension, I have to try and coach it out of them. I have to just constantly be asking questions about what this person wants. And then also set that expectation that, like, I can help them in many aspects, but I need to know about what they care about.
Mm-hmm. Zuri, did you have anything to mention about that? I saw that you had your hand raised.
Oh, that was by accident.
That's okay.
No, I +1. In the interest of time, what I will say is I +1 everything that everyone has said.
That's awesome. Awesome. That's so cool. And I like what you said, Marlo, because I think a lot of people, especially younger people coming in, and maybe some introverted employees, they feel like they can't speak up and to see where their goals are. And I think just realizing early on that you're driving your car, you're driving, you have the hand on your steering wheel. People can help you, give you directions, but you have to take it where you want it to go. And I think I learned that. And I feel like underrepresented minorities might actually have always known that we are going to be our at times only advocates. So we learned this I found that we've learned this quite early on, that if I don't ask for something, I'm not going to get it, because it's not given to me until I ask for it. So I think that's something that we've learned, but there's still a lot of work to be done to make sure that people are empowered to ask for what they want. Like when you want a promotion, ask for it. If you want to try something new, ask for it. And this takes practice and confidence. And I like to see that it's mentioned here quite explicitly that we need to be asking for what we deserve, right? So that's awesome. Yeah. Yes, exactly. Oh, we have a question in chat about imposter syndrome. Do you have anything that you want to add on that? We did have a workshop, a meeting about it earlier in the event, but if any of you wanted to add something on that, that would be cool too.
Oh yeah, I mean, like, so I unfortunately was not able to attend that earlier workshop, but hopefully it was mentioned that everybody deals with imposter syndrome, and I think like one of the kind of personal coping mechanisms that I think about is like going back to, what's within my sphere of control, as well as what is like what am I good at? Like reflecting on those skills that I'm good at. But I mean, there have been some days where I've like wrapped up and just thought like, I have no business being a manager. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. Everyone is going to realize this and show me the door. And yeah, it's challenging, right? Like, because you're really in your own head and you have to try and bring some external subjective and objective feedback back in, right? And yeah, one of the things that I've been really fortunate about in terms of like having a vehicle for dealing with that is just being really open and transparent about it with my own lead and my own manager, and saying like, hey, like, you know, these things, these factors are contributing to making me feel like this, like, you know, asking for their advice if they've, you know, like asking if they've experienced imposter syndrome before and expecting them to say yes and like give me some examples as well. Yeah.
That's awesome and really reassuring to know that everyone deals with that. And before we end off, I just want to ask quickly in a couple words, what would you say to your younger self if you could talk to them right now?
That's a tough one.
I kind of
think
like
back
threw it at you
many,
guys.
many years.
I would say from myself is to develop technical skills. Admittedly, I still struggle. And that's the, yeah, that is definitely what I would tell my younger self, is lean more into gaining technical skills.
Yeah, I think for me personally, one kind of key piece of advice that I would give my earlier self would be like, you know, the people who you kind of idolize and put on a pedestal are just like you. We're all human beings and we're all the same, right? And people who are, you know, like CEOs or VPs of engineering and stuff like that, who you look up to, they were in your shoes years ago, right? They just have more, a larger summation of experiences, right? And if you can start a dialogue with those folks, like you can start learning from those experiences too.
That's awesome. Have you thought of anything, Shafina?
I did. I thought, you know, because they both touched on really great points too. So I won't repeat that. But the one I will talk about, and there's many, many points, obviously, but the one I will talk about is, it's actually referenced in a book I recently read, and the book is called The Happiness Advantage. So if anyone's looking for a book to read, you must read this book. It's The Happiness Advantage. And essentially, you know, the one thing I'm, you know, really remembering right now as we're conducting this panel is that, you know, we spend our lives chasing success because we think that's going to make us happy. When in actuality, the research that was conducted in this book was that we first need to establish happiness so that we can drive our own success. We need to change the way that we think. And I wish, you know, my younger self understood that. When I was younger, I was like, ooh, if I reach this level, I'm going to be happy. And then I keep, you know, attaining these goals and I get all this, you know, happiness out of being successful, which, you know, there is some level of truth. But I think if we have the ability to flip the way we think, you'll be quite surprised how happy we can be.
That is amazing, inspirational, and I like that. That really gives us a lot of food for thought. Francis, did you want to end us off with something you want to say to your younger self?
Yeah, I think, you know, for the folks listening, you are all probably incredibly ambitious and young. I would just caution you, like, you're going to get older one day and it will come sooner than you realize. I remember when I graduated from undergrad and I was still doing undergrad. And when I first started out my career, I had a terrible diet, didn't really know how to take care of myself and be independent, and was a workaholic. So wasn't really like caring for my body. And it wasn't honestly until the pandemic that I really like reassessed what I was doing in that department. Because I think it's very easy to sort of let yourself go in that aspect, especially if you're kind of grinding and hustling 24/7, like you may be when you're very young and starting out. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that necessarily, but it's you have to just kind of make sure you recognize that health is wealth, right? And that your body is really important and you need to take care of it. And it seems really simple. For me, it was really difficult. And I think like all of us have vices, and it's just important to kind of make sure that it doesn't take over your life. Yeah.
That's amazing and a really great reminder, especially during a pandemic where we have to be extra careful, taking care of ourselves. So thank you. Oh, I had a great time talking to all of you. Thank you so much, Shafina, Marlo, Zuri, and Francis. This is amazing. I hope that a lot of the viewers are able to find value in this as well. And thank you so much for spending your time with us on a Saturday. I hope you had fun too. Thank you.
I did. Thank you.
Well,
Absolutely. Yes. Thanks.
Awesome. So now I'll leave it up to you. You can come in and take over the stage. But thank you everybody for joining us today.
Sounds good. I'm just gonna hit stop recording.